Imagine starting a company and in just 4 years, it is bought for over $5 billion. In the process, making you a billionaire at only 40 years old. One would ask, what miracle-saving drug or world-changing technology did you invent to amass such an enormous amount of wealth in so little time? Well, this isn't one of those stories of a genius inventor who changed the world. Quite to the contrary. This is the story about dumb luck and a masterclass in grifting, a rags to riches story of a bartender who found himself at the center of one of the greatest stock market bubbles in human history, cashing in on the mass hysteria surrounding the internet boom, amassing a fortune from a company that was essentially vaporware, and when the stock market came crashing down and everyone was watching their wealth vanish into thin air, that former bartender somehow emerged as one of the few people who not only survived the crash, but emerged as a billionaire. This is the story of Mark Cuban and how he cashed in on the insanity that was the dot-com bubble. It involves insane greed, excessive displays of wealth, and one of the greatest speculative bubbles in stock market history, and just plain dumb money. Mark Cuban started out life from humble beginnings. Born into a working-class family in Pittsburgh, from an early age, Cuban was determined to change his circumstances and become rich someday. While other kids his age were watching cartoons, Cuban was flipping through business books and magazines, trying to understand how rich people made their fortunes. At 12 years old, he started selling garbage bags door to door to make enough money to buy shoes he really wanted, which his family couldn't afford to buy for him. Throughout his childhood, he would engage in several entrepreneurial activities. Cuban was a smart and ambitious child, but he didn't enjoy school. He wasn't fond of following rules and didn't like learning stuff he didn't find interesting. Not willing to bear another year of school, Mark Cuban skipped his senior year of high school, opting to enroll directly into the University of Pittsburgh, but only stayed for a year as he would later transfer to Indiana University, which had the cheapest business school in America at the time. Coming from a working class family, money was very limited for the young Mark Cuban, so to pay his way through college, Cuban started giving disco lessons, throwing campus events, and even running a chain letter business. After graduating, Cuban moved to Dallas with a beat-up car and no idea what he was going to do with his life. He got a bartender job to make ends meet. Shortly thereafter, he transitioned to a sales job at a software company, which would be short-lived as he would be fired in less than a year into the new job. He was fired for closing a $15,000 deal instead of opening the shop on time. This was the breaking point for Mark Cuban. Frustrated with working for a boss, he ventured out to start his own business. Backed by former clients from his previous sales job, he founded Micro Solutions, a software installation and software reseller that did the exact same thing that his previous employer did. He grew the company to millions of dollars in revenue, selling it to CompuServe in 1990 for $6 million, making $2 million from his own personal ownership stake in the company. At right around the same time as Mark Cuban became a millionaire in the 90s, this new thing called the internet was taking off. Originally a network that connected computers across college campuses and government agencies, the internet had begun connecting computers across homes in America and the world at large, gaining mainstream adoption. In 1991, the internet had only 2.1 million users, but by 1997, that number had exploded to over 120 million users. In its early years, the internet was quite niche and a few people were able to use it. This was in part due to how unintuitive it was to use the internet. That was until the introduction of Netscape. Netscape was one of the first commercially available, easy to use, intuitive web browsers ever created. Before Netscape, the internet was made up of plain text web pages that were barely useful to anyone. Netscape changed everything, allowing the embedding of photos, videos, and various types of media within web pages, also allowing web pages to have sleek formatting and easy on the eye layouts, making them more navigable and useful to the average user. By 1995, Netscape had become the most popular web browser in the world, commanding a market share of 75%. amassing over 35 million users. It would be that same year of 1995, just 16 months after it had been started, that Netscape would effectively begin the internet gold rush. In August of 1995, Netscape went public on the stock market, reaching a market cap of nearly $3 billion in its first day of trading. What was crazy about this IPO was that unlike traditional stock market listings, Netscape wasn't profitable. Not only was it not profitable, but its revenue of $80 million was far less than its insane $3 billion market cap. But investors didn't care about Netscape's financials. From 1990 to 1995, the internet had grown 25-fold, and this rate of growth was not going to slow down anytime soon. The potential of billions of users using Netscape made their $3 billion market cap seem like a bargain. The idea of an internet company that had potential to capture a market with a potential of billions of users began what was possibly one of the greatest speculative bubbles in human history. Following Netscape's IPO, almost overnight, thousands of tech companies began popping up, promising to disrupt industries with their revolutionary new websites. Some of these companies had quite neat ideas, like Amazon, eBay, and PayPal. Amazon made online shopping practical and reliable. eBay created a trusted platform for peer-to-peer commerce at scale, and PayPal filled a crucial gap by making online payments fast, easy, and secure. But other ideas were just plain stupid. One example was KTEL International, an old-school music label, which saw its stock surge 1000% in a single week after it began promoting itself as an online business. The Globe.com is an infamous example of this. It was a super basic social site started by two college kids in their dorm rooms in the mid-90s. All you could do on the site was make a profile and talk to strangers. It was essentially one giant glorified chat room. That's it. No real tech, no innovation, no algorithms. Just a website with user profiles on it in a giant chat room. It was unprofitable from the very beginning, burning millions of dollars and had no clear path to profitability. Despite this, it went public in 1998. Its stock was set to open at $9 per share, but when the day of the IPO came, it opened at $87 and closed at over $60, a near 600% surge in its first day of trading, giving the company a market cap of almost $1 billion from a total revenue of only $1.5 million. Its young founders, barely in their 20s, became overnight millionaires, bought Ferraris, penthouses, and became the poster boys for .com access. This is the insane world that Mark Cuban found himself in, a world of dumb money, insane speculation, and sheer delusion. Mark Cuban set his sights on getting in on the craze of the .com gold rush. This is where Broadcast.com enters the picture. Originally founded as AudioNet in the early 90s, it was a really simple idea. It was
radio on internet.
Yep, radio on the internet. The website took local radio broadcasts and allowed anyone who went on the site to be able to listen in on those broadcasts from anywhere in the world. Streaming live content in the early years of the internet was quite costly, so the founder of AudioNet would approach Mark Cuban to invest in his company. Mark Cuban was a die-hard fan of his former college basketball team and was intrigued by the idea of being able to keep up with their games from anywhere in the world. AudioNet combined a passion of Cuban's with the potential growth of an internet venture, which enticed him to invest. He rebranded the company to Broadcast.com and funded an expensive marketing campaign. The site, however, was painfully difficult to use. The streams constantly buffered and most users were on dial-up internet, which could not handle live stream transmissions. But what Broadcast.com lacked in technology, they made up for with hustle, marketing, and some might say masterful grifting. Mark Cuban was a showman and he took control of the marketing efforts of the company. He pitched Broadcast.com not as a niche audio streaming site, but as the future of radio, television, and all media. This site was essentially vaporware. It didn't work half of the time, and even when you got it to work, most people's dial-up internet couldn't handle live streaming. Yet Mark Cuban and Broadcast.com capitalized on the hysteria of the internet and rode the .com wave all the way to the stock market. In 1998, the company went public and saw its shares soar over 250% on its first day of trading, giving the company a market cap of $1 billion. Mark Cuban, who owned 30% of the company, saw the value of his shares go to $300 million. This wealth coming from a site that barely worked and most people with dial-up internet couldn't physically use. But that isn't even the craziest part of the story. In 1999, Yahoo, which itself was a dot-com startup, made a shock multi-billion-dollar offer to acquire Broadcast.com. Founded in 1994 by two Stanford graduate students, it began as a manually curated directory of links organized by category to help users navigate the chaotic early internet. As the internet exploded in popularity in the mid-1990s, Yahoo evolved from a simple directory into a fully fledged web portal, offering not just search but email, news, stock quotes, weather, games, and a lot more. It became the default homepage for millions of users and a central hub for early internet activity. The company went public in 1996 and its stock soared, riding the dot-com wave of investor enthusiasm. By 1999, Yahoo was one of the most visited websites on earth, attracting tens of millions of users and generating hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising revenue. Its market cap reached $125 billion. In order to grow its portal services and content offering, Yahoo went on an acquisition frenzy in the late 90s. They bought GeoCities in 1999 for $3.5 billion. eGroups was purchased in 2000 for $432 million. ViaWeb was bought in 1998 for $49 million. All of these acquisitions that Yahoo made were all unprofitable. And during this acquisition frenzy, they set their sights on Broadcast.com, acquiring the young company for $5.7 billion. At the time, Broadcast.com had only $13.6 million in revenue and 570,000 users, meaning Yahoo was effectively paying $10,000 for each user of Broadcast.com's unprofitable website. But the deal wasn't a cash deal. Yahoo had nowhere near $5.7 billion in cash to pay for Broadcast.com. In fact, in 1999, the company's total revenue was less than $600 million, yet it was valued at over $100 billion. Instead of cash, Yahoo offered Broadcast.com shareholders stock in Yahoo. That was equivalent to the value of their shares in Broadcast.com. From the deal, Mark Cuban emerged with 14.6 million shares of Yahoo, valued at over $1 billion, making him a billionaire. But just a few months after the acquisition, something catastrophic happened. The stock market began crashing, leaving in its wake thousands of bankrupt dot-com companies. Mark Cuban, witnessing this surreal event, couldn't help but smile. You see, Mark Cuban had recognized quite early on that the internet boom was a bubble. He saw this day coming from a mile away, and he had already prepared for it. When Cuban received his Yahoo shares, instead of holding those shares unprotected, he executed a collar strategy, which was a financial move that allowed him to lock in the high value of the Yahoo stock while avoiding taxes and the appearance of an outright sale. He used puts and calls to essentially freeze the value of his shares near their peak, which were trading at around $95 to $100 at the time. When the dot-com bubble popped, Yahoo stock plunged by over 98%, dropping below $10 per share. Cuban's position was protected. His collar strategy worked like an insurance policy, allowing him to preserve well over $1 billion in value of his shares. It was a masterclass in financial foresight, making him one of a few people who not only survived the dot-com crash, but also emerged as a billionaire. When it was all said and done, Yahoo stock plummeted from a high of $125 billion in market cap to just $10 billion. In the following years, Yahoo would write off most of its dot-com era acquisitions. This included Broadcast.com, which was officially shut down in 2002, written off as essentially worthless. But as for Mark Cuban, he walked away as a billionaire, becoming one of the wealthiest men in the world, which he still remains to this very day.